This is Algebra 2, Test 12 Study Guide. First question we have f of x equals x squared minus 4x plus 1. It says to label the axis of symmetry and vertex after you graph it. So we have y equals, it's in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c, or 1x squared minus 4x plus 1. So in order to find the value of x, you plug in, this is the formula here, negative b over 2a. So negative b means a negative 4 minus a negative 4 over 2 times a is 2 times 1. So when we simplify to find the x value, we have negative 4, negative times negative is positive 4. We get the x value 2. I just kind of have a couple of extra things written on the right there, but x value is 2. Now, in order to find the y value, you take that x value and you plug it back into the same original equation. Y equals 1 times x is now 1 times 2. If we go back up here, 1 times 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 1. When you simplify that, 2 times 2 is 4, or 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. So 1 times 4 is 4 minus 8 plus 1. You get your y value of negative 3. Now you have both values. X is 2 and y's value is negative 3. So now you have your vertex, x comma y, or 2, negative 3. The line of symmetry is actually even easier to name because you already found the x value, x equals 2. That's your line of symmetry. In order to graph it, you want to start with your vertex. So right here, we start with our vertex. Our point is 2, negative 3. We'll start with that point right there, 2, negative 3. So from there, you want to pick 2 points, the next 2 adjacent points, either going to the left or to the right. It doesn't matter which way you go, but if we know our x value is 2 here. So if we go 1 time to the right, our x value will be 3. If we go to the left, our x value will be 1. That's usually easier for most people to multiply. So when you take the x value of 1, you plug it back into the original equation. Y equals 1 squared is y equals 1. Negative 4 times 1 is minus 4 plus 1. 1 minus 4 is negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. So y's value is negative 2. So when x is 1, y is negative 2. That's the next point. So 1, negative 2. And you can mirror that one. That's what the line of symmetry means. 1 space to the right as well. Do the same thing with the next available x value, which is 0. So we'll plug in place of the original equation, y equals x squared is 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 1. 0 squared is 0 minus anything times 0 is 0 plus 1. So y's value simply is 1. So when we put x's value 0 in, now we have another ordered pair, 0, 1. And that's your third point on your x-axis. You don't go left or right at all, but you go up to 1. And again, you can mimic that one with the next value. Oh, can move it over a little bit. The next value over, you put it at the same y height. And this is your graph. Your vertex is already labeled. And if you named your line of symmetry, you would simply say x equals 2. Do the same thing with graphing f of x is less than or equal to x squared minus 4x minus 1. The difference with this one is we're dealing with an inequality, so we're going to have to shade one part or the other. You still start off with the same formula. You find x's value. X is negative b over 2a. Well, we know that this is y, and we know that this is ax squared plus bx plus c. So b's value would be negative 4. So negative 4 becomes positive 4, and 2 times a is 2 times 1 because there's a 1 coefficient in front of x squared. So 4 divided by 2, again, we get the x value of 2. In order to find y's value, take the original equation and plug in that value 2 in place of x. So x squared becomes 2 squared. Negative 4 times x becomes negative 4 times 2 minus 1. 2 squared is 4, and negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. So 4 minus 8 minus 1. 4 minus 8 we know is negative 4. Minus 1 is negative 5. So we have an x and a y value. That is our vertex, 2, comma, negative 5. So from there, we can already graph our vertex, which is here, 2, negative 5, and we can put in our line of symmetry, x equals 2. So then you need to find 2 more points. So again, we can go with the same numbers we did on the last one. We can go one more time to the left or one more time to the right. The left just happens to be easier because you get the x values 1. 1 squared is 1. Negative 4 times 1 is minus 4 minus 1. So y's value is 1 minus 4, which is negative 3. And negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. So when x's value is 1, y's value is negative 4. So we can put that value 1, negative 4, and we can mimic that one on the other side. And do the same thing with x's value being 0. 0 squared we know is 0. Negative 4 times 0 is 0. So y equals 0 minus 1, or y equals negative 1. So when x's value is 0, y is negative 1. And we could plot that point as well. 0, negative 1. And again, we can mimic that one more space to the right. So now we have what we can draw in our graph. You have to determine if it's a solid line or a dashed line. Remember, this tells you if it's solid or dashed or not. The bottom, the fact that it says or equal to. That means that you need to make a solid line showing the graph. Do the same thing on the other side. Try to make it as smooth as you can. The other part about inequalities is you have to make sure on the inequality that you have to see which side do I have to graph. Pick one point that's not going to fall on the graph. Luckily for us, 0, 0 is not on the graph. So we can plug that value into the original equation. So y is less than or equal to x squared minus 4 times x minus 1. We can plug in 0 for y and 0 for both cases of x. So we have 0 is less than or equal to 0 squared minus 4 times 0 minus 1. 0 squared is 0. Negative 4 times 0 is 0. So you're left with 0 is less than or equal to negative 1. You have to determine if that is true or not. That is not true. Negative 1 is smaller than 0. So that means everything inside of the parabola is wrong, which means you need to shade everything outside of it to show that being correct, and that's your graphed function. Then we have to solve the equation for number 3. You just work your order of operations backwards. Get rid of plus 9. 16x squared equals negative 9. Get rid of 16 times something by dividing by 16. And you have x squared equals negative 9 over 16. Get rid of squaring something by taking the square root of it. Do the same to the right. So you have x equals the square root of negative 9 over the square root of 16. Well, we can simplify that because we know we have to take out I. So that becomes the square root of 9 times I, is what x is going to be, over the square root of 16 is 4. So x equals the square root of 9 we know is 3 times I over the square root, over 4. And again, all of that's going to be plus or minus since you had 2 square roots. So 3I over 4. Okay, we don't have Okay, for this one, x squared plus 6x plus 9, that's a perfect trinomial. That means that we could take the square root of the first one and get x, and the square root of the c value, or the third one, and get 3. This tells us we have to put plus in the middle of them and square it. So we went from a trinomial to now we have a binomial squared. So x plus 3 squared equals 36. In order to get rid of squaring something, take the square root of it, do the same here, and it leaves you with x plus 3 because this cancels this. Equals the square root of 36 is 6. Then get rid of, but it's not just 6. That's the key. It's 6 or negative 6. So then get rid of plus 3 by subtracting it. If you do it there, do it here. 6 minus 3 is 3, or do it here as well. Negative 6 minus 3 is negative 9. So x equals both 3 or negative 9. We have to distribute negative 2 to both terms. Negative 2 times y is negative 2y. Negative 2 times 9 is minus 18. Equals y plus 7. Move your smaller y's over to your larger ones. Add 2y to this side because it's smaller. So 1y plus 2y is 3y plus 7 equals negative 18. Get rid of plus 7 by subtracting it on both sides. 3y equals negative 25. and then get y by itself by dividing by 3 on both sides. 3 is not going to go into 25, so y equals negative 25 over 3. 4 plus 8n equals 28. Get rid of positive 4 on both sides, so you have 8n equals 24. Get rid of 8 times something by dividing by 8 on both sides. N equals 3. Distribute. 4 times y is 4y. 4 times 5 is plus 20. Get rid of plus 20 by subtracting it on both sides. 4y equals 20. Get rid of 4 times something by dividing it on both sides. Y equals 5. Factor this expression. They both have a negative in common, and they both have an x. Negative 1 times what gives you negative 4? Times 4. Negative x times what gives you x squared? Times x. Times a positive 7, and there's no more x because you already have it. So negative x times 4x plus 7. That was a binomial. This is a trinomial, x squared minus 17x plus 7. In order to do this one, you have to factor out the c value. Well, we have c's factors right here. You have to choose which pair of those, when you combine them, is going to give you that b term, 17, either positive or negative. 1 and 70, when you combine them, is either going to give you 71 or 69, 33 or 37, 19 or 9, and then 7 plus 10 is 17 or 3. So 7 and 10 are your only options as a pair. So you have to choose 7 and 10. Once you have that, you have to decide, do we put plus or minus inside? The sign before the c value, it's plus. That tells you that the numbers are going to be the same, or the signs, I should say, are going to be the same. The sign in front of the b value, or the second one, tells you that since they were the same, they're both going to be minus. So x minus 7 times x minus 10. Do the same thing with 10. Factor out the c value 63 again. Its only pair that is going to get you to the number 2 is the last pair, 7 and 9. So if you choose 7 and 9, now we'll look at this one. Now it's not plus like the last one, it's minus. That means that the signs are going to be different. One's going to be plus and one's going to be minus. The sign in front of the b value tells you, since they're different, it tells you the higher absolute value is going to be positive since it says plus. We know 9 is a bigger number, so that one's going to be plus. Since they're the opposite signs, that one's going to be minus. X minus 7 times x plus 9. We're writing these in the form of a plus bi. We know to get rid of a negative value underneath the radical like this, negative 64, we multiply it times I. So the imaginary number times 60, the square root of 64 plus 1. So it's the imaginary number times plus or minus or positive or negative 8 plus 1. So written in a plus bi form, 1 plus or minus 8i. The same thing with this one. I times the square root of 49 plus 2, which means I times, we know the square root of 49 is 7, but it's both positive and negative, plus 2. So when we rewrite it in a plus bi form, 2 plus, or 2 we should say plus or minus 7 times I. Find a missing value to complete the square. So don't confuse this one with the other one where x was equal to negative b over 2a. This one we're trying to find c. C is equal to b over 2 squared. Well, we know b's value is 20. So 20 over 2 is 10, and 10 squared is 100. So c's value is 100. 14 says solve it by completing the square. Where we don't have a perfect trinomial, so we have to get rid of plus 41 on both sides. So now we have x squared plus 12x, and we want to put in plus c there equals negative 41. So in order to find c, we find it the same way, b divided by 2 squared. B's value is 12 divided by 2, which is 6 squared, so c's value is 36. So in order to put in plus c here, we put in plus 36, but you can't just do it to the left. You have to add 36 to the right as well. Now we have a perfect trinomial. You can take the square root of that and get x, and the square root of that and get 6. This tells you that they're adding together, and we know that it's a binomial squared. Negative 41 plus 36 is negative 5. So now undo squaring something by taking the square root of it. X plus 6 equals I times the square root of 5. So then just get rid of plus 6 by subtracting it out of there on both sides. So now we have x equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 5 times I.